Hey Simonics, what's up? Welcome to a new Ionic tutorial, and today we're gonna talk about WordPress integration once again. The last video on WordPress got quite good feedback, I would say, so I wanted to extend this on a new topic, and we will implement WordPress authentication using the REST API of WordPress with our Ionic app. There's now also an extended course on this topic, including WordPress posts, category search, push notifications, and everything with Capacitor inside the Ionic Academy. So if you're interested in this topic, definitely check out the Ionic Academy and the latest course. Now, to get started, I actually have a local WordPress instance running right here. I use MEMP. I think it's a great tool to use a local WordPress installation. And also we need to prepare WordPress in a few ways to enable everything for our app. So what we need is first of all the JSON Web Token authentication for the WordPress API, because by default this is not enabled, and I think the JSON Web Token authentication works best with Angular and Ionic apps. So this is for general authentication. We also need the WordPress REST user plugin. Actually, you could also code this yourself. I found this somewhere on Stack Overflow, but the creator of the answer also created this tool, this plugin, so I just installed it. It is needed in order to register new users with the API and also have a forgot password API route. Now, I also got, using FakerPress, some dummy data, which isn't really interesting, but I also made a few posts private. So these posts are only showing up to certain roles, and we will see how to get them later in our application. Now, that's for the clicking stuff of WordPress, but there's also something we need to change in the real WordPress installation. So what we need to change for the JSON Web Token authentication is first of all, inside the Htaccess, or I think in some hostings it's a different file, but in general, this rewrite condition to allow or check for the authorization headers. I'm not really a WordPress expert or PHP expert, so if something that I tell about WordPress and PHP is wrong, please just correct me. What we need as well, very important, and that was an issue in the last video, is actually this snippet, which goes to your functions PHP inside WordPress, which basically allows the course headers that you usually have problems with Ionic apps. So that's this part. Also, something that is really tricky or was really tricky to figure out is that the Ionic app, or if you're using Capacitor, basically makes requests with an origin like Capacitor or Ionic. Everything works from Ionic Serve, everything is fine. Once you run the app on a device, nothing works. So you have to add the filter, either Capacitor or Ionic, whatever you're using. And then WordPress will also allow that you actually make requests to the API through the app. Now, Htaccess Functions, and finally, this is also described when you install the JSON Web Token API plugin. In your WordPress config file, you have to define these two values, course enable, perhaps that's actually the same like this. As I said, I'm not really an expert. And also an authentication secret key. You can generate one online or just use whatever value for testing. So that's it for the local setup. And now we can actually switch to our Ionic app, which I already started. So a blank new Ionic application. And I just created one service that we will implement for all the service functionality, and we will use Ionic Storage to store our JSON Web Token and later assign it to our requests. And of course, if we want to use this, we should also create a new folder, Interceptors, because I think the API can't create this, even the Angular CLI. And once again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't figured out how to make this work yet. So this interceptor will be used once we get a token to attach the token to each and every request that we make. I'll just bring in the bare bones. Let's just keep it like this for now. I hope this works. So we can first of all configure our app module, because we need a few imports. What we need is, of course, the HTTP client module. which goes to the imports to make any kind of HTTP requests. We need the Ionic storage module for root, and we also need the JSON Web Token interceptor, which is used like this. So provide for HTTP interceptors, what we import here as well. Use class our very own JSON Web Token interceptor and multi-true to make it work. This basically tells our app that whenever we make an HTTP request, please also consider our JSON Web Token interceptor, which will then have some logic to check the request, get a token, attach it to the header later. Now, that's it for the app module. I think for now we should get back to the implementation of the API service, because the views will then become a lot easier, and I'm not sure what this UI issue with Visual Studio Code is. So first of all, we need to define a little key which we will use to just have a reference where we want to store our JSON Web Token. Perhaps we start with some functions, and I will actually bring in a few of them because there's quite a lot of code in this tutorial, and of course you can always check it out below the video to find all the code, but I will just describe this as good as possible. Now, to use our API URL, we can go to our environment and simply define the API URL however you want it in here. Just a quick note, you can of course use localhost in here, but once you deploy your app to a real device, you will not be able to connect to localhost. So the better idea is to use the IP of your local PC, or if you have a WordPress instance on the web, that's even better, then just use that IP. Also, I have WordPress right here, simply because if you check it out, it is at localhost 888 WordPress. So that is basically my starting point. It's not only localhost 8888, but in the subfolder WordPress. And of course, this comes to the end just to save a bit of typing in our actual application. Now back to the API service. Perhaps we should start with the sign-in, which will make an HTTP request to WordPress. Therefore, we need to inject HTTP client. There we go. Now our sign-in uses username and password, and let's make this a bit bigger, and of course I bring it in and everything's red, but we can fix this. Let's try to add all missing imports just for fun. Yeah, I think that's fine. And in terms of switch map, we might need a few more imports. So map, switch map tab from RxJS operators. And then we also need the storage, which is Ionic storage. So make sure you're picking the right import and adding storage to your imports as well. Now the thing becomes actually a bit better, and we just need one more declaration. Now we got everything in place. So for the sign up, we make a post request to our API URL that we defined previously, /JSON Web Token Authentication version 1, token. We pass in username and password, and this syntax is basically the same like having username and password in here, so you can save a bit of typing in that place if the name of the variable is actually the same like the key. Now, we're not only using this result and return it back, but instead we set it to Ionic storage, because this is the key, the token that we need to attach to our calls later, and also that we can retrieve when we start our application. And because this call returns a promise, and we are right now in an observable logic, we can transform it using from to an observable. Why are we doing this? If we have an observable, we can simply return it and call switch map, which basically switches from the HTTP observable that we have to this observable, and then we can keep the chain inside the pipe in place. So this returns just, I think it returns, what does this actually return? I think the data once again, so the token. Perhaps we'll put in a lock here just to show it. And with that data, once we've written it to storage, we also use it directly in the app by setting a next value on our behavior subject user right here. So this is a special type of subject. You could also use a standard subject, but with a behavior subject, you can always get the value, the latest value. You can simply call next. You can set an initial value. I think we have talked about behavior subjects in the past as well. Now, because we have written it now in the sign-in function to the storage, we can actually also keep track in the constructor and load it whenever our platform is ready. So private platform from Ionic Angular, get from the storage, and then from storage we got back some data. Now, normally we would continue with the API, but I think it might be more interesting to see this already in action. So let's move over to our homepage, HTML, module, everything. To the module, because we need access to reactive forms module, so that's the only change in there. And then we can continue with the homepage. So private form builder, private API, private toast controller. So everything that you might need access to goes right here. Alert controller. I think that's everything for now. So we can also use the value from the API of the current user, but let's not do this right now. And start with the user form so we can actually pass some data back to our API and test that everything is working. Implements on init. On init, please import. Yes, thanks. And ng on init. Now we can set up our user form. I will actually use both username and email because for the sign up, I think for the sign up you have to pass all three values, and we will just combine this in a kind of easy way. So to use our login, we need one more helper function that will also come in handy in other places just to show an error. Based on the error we get back from the API. So it's wrapped in the error. We could also name this different, but that's not really interesting. But what's interesting is our login. So the login works now simply using our API service, pass the username, password, and then something happens. We don't really need to handle it in here. Of course you can, but we will have access to the user value anyway inside our API service and by subscribing to the user in here. All right, to show everything, let's move to the homepage. Let's get rid of a few things in here because we don't really need them. So devdectic WordPress, and the color is primary. And I will bring in a little Ion card because I'm lazy to type all of this. Once again, check out the article below if you're just as lazy as me. Here we got our form group connected to a user form. We have the login already available. We need to implement the sign up and the password reset, of course, as well. And we should also use an Ion card around this. So now we might be able to check out our application. Or we might not be. Injectable is not defined. Yeah, I was thinking of this. So let's comment this out just for now, and also stop it in here and here. We will have to revisit it, but I wanted to show you how it's working. So I already got a few users in here. I got the admin user and I got another user. So let's use this second user and the password and call sign in. And of course, it's always the same. I'm not sure why, but whenever I create something or add a function and the Ionic serve is simply out of sync, I really don't know why this is happening all the time for me. It's really kind of frustrating. And of course, it always happens in the videos as well. But Let's hope for the best. So here we go again. There we go. There we go. Sign in. And you see what we get back is user nice name, user display name, user email, and the awesome JSON web token that we need to make authenticated requests to our API. So that is already the most important part of the tutorial. I hope you will still stick with me until the end. What we need to do now is to implement actually the interceptor logic, I think, because then we can get rid of the errors and simply have everything for that in place. Let's replace this and take a look at it. So this is a basic implementation of an HTTP interceptor, which mostly looks always like this. We try to disable the Slack notifications, and we also try to get the current user value. In this place, the behavior subject comes in really handy because getting the value is super easy. If I find it, I will just bring it into our API service to fix any issues. So you can either return the behavior subject as an observable, or you can call getValue, which will immediately give you the value, and you don't have to subscribe or use promises. This will simply give us the value. Now, if we have a user and the user has a token stored, we can clone the request and set the authorization header of our request just like this and call next handle the request. That's the full logic for the JSON Web Token interceptor. Now we can also go back to the app module and enable this again and actually close interceptor and app module because we've achieved what we wanted. Since we are in the API service, yeah, I guess I just have to restart it once again since I did something. Whatever. My interceptor is fine, that's not the problem. Now let's implement the other API functions. We of course need a logout, which will simply remove our JSON Web Token and call next with null on our user. That's just what we always do when we're using JSON Web Token authentication. Yeah, now the app seems to work once again. Let's also bring in all the other necessary functions, which are, and I will just copy this, the sign up, using once again basically the same URL, and now the endpoint user/register. This comes from the plugin that we installed. It's normally not working like this. To reset the password, we're using the most likely the same route, and this also comes from the same plugin. And we need to pass user login, which could either be the username or the email, and so that's up to us. Finally, we also want to get private posts, and if you make this request without a token, we will actually see that it's not working because this endpoint with status private needs authentication and also actually needs a specific role. So I will show you this in a second. The transformation in here is just to check if the post has a featured media and make it accessible a bit easier just under post media URL instead of trying to get this value in your view. So that's just a little simplification. All right, we're I guess already way too long in the video, so let's hurry up and use all of these functionalities in our homepage. I already started typing this. We simply want to get the current user observable because we want to show the login form or some information and just flip this based on this subject. Also, since let's open the constructor. Since this is now an observable, we can of course subscribe to it. And if we got a user, we will load the private posts. And if we don't have a user, we will reset this back to an empty array. Load private posts will of course do exactly what you think it might do. So it will now use the API function to get the private post, subscribe, and access the posts. Let's also log this out, my posts, result, there we go. And the logout simply calls the logout. We don't need to especially handle the logout or the sign-in since we already use this observable. So you could, for example, also have this in your app component at the top level and immediately route the users forward. You could have an auth guard. There are also tutorials on this here on this channel on using authentication guards. The only thing that's missing now is our sign up functionality. So let's put this right after the login, which now is almost way too long, but it's again using our API functionality or the service functionality, username, email, password, and as a result, we will show a little toast. The only thing that's a bit more complicated, well, not complicated, but it's more code, is to open the password reset, simply because we need an alert controller with an input, so you can input your username or email then. And once you click reset password, we will trigger the actual action, which is once again making use of our API. So call reset password with the username or email, and then you should hopefully get an email. Now, all the functionality is in place, and we just need to wrap this up with a little change to our application. So I will transform this now with magic to an Ion card, which is based on this very cool expression. So it simply means subscribe to the user, which is an observable. And if there's a user set, or if there's actually no user set, I don't know why, just to make it more complicated, I guess. If we don't have a user, we will show this Ion card, which is still the same like before. And if we have a user, we will show the welcome template. So that's the ng if else syntax. I think we haven't used this before in here. Here's the ng template for welcome, simple card, welcome back, using the JSON information of the user just to show a bit that we have an authenticated user and that we can log him out once again. Also important is now the card with the iteration over all the posts. I will save this so we can take a look at it. It's basically unwrapping a few properties from the WordPress API response, like the title, the media URL. That's actually the custom one we did with the mapping in the service, and also the excerpt render. I also added a little information here as an example. So normally you might have a read more button that will use router link to a new route, posts, post ID, and then you have to set up the details page and the routing. Once again, everything inside the full course in the Academy. Now, we already way too far in here. So let's start actually by testing. Okay, I'm Simon2. I will use another email and a super secret password. Let's try to register. User Simon2, registration was successful. This actually comes from the WordPress plugin. And if you check back in WordPress, you will see that we now got the user Simon2. What we also see is that I can sign in now and I get a token, but I also get back an HTTP error since this user is not automatically allowed. The user has the role subscriber, and you need at least the role editor to see private posts. So I will switch the role inside WordPress and try it once again. Remember, the token is stored in Ionic storage, and now we're also able to see all of these. So here's the full response from WordPress with all the private posts, and this response now actually only contains private posts. We can also go to the network tab and see where's, there we go. This is the post with the header attached, and if you scroll down, you will see here's the authorization header that comes from the interceptor of our application. We're also, of course, able to lock this user out. We can call forget password for, okay, what was the name? I think Simon2. And reset password link had strange wording here from the plugin, but it had been sent to your email. If you're testing locally, you might have to set up some custom SMTP for email sending. I did this using I don't know what I used actually, but normally the emails won't be delivered, so perhaps you already have a live instance that will make life easier. So we're now able to register WordPress users through the WordPress API. We're able to call forgot password. We're able to sign in with JSON Web Tokens, and we're also able to attach this token using the Interceptor automatically to our calls. If you got any questions about further WordPress Ionic integration stuff, please always let me know. I really enjoy working with this. I'm not a WordPress expert, so if you got any comments on this, please let me know and share this. And also, if you want to see an extended course on WordPress on actually using push notifications whenever a post was released, so that was really a huge fun to implement, go check out the Ionic Academy and the recent course about WordPress. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed so you get notified about all the new tutorials, quick wins, and other app development and web development videos on this channel. If you want to learn more about Ionic with in-depth courses, a community of like-minded developers so you can learn and build your apps faster, you should definitely check out the Ionic Academy, which is my code school to help you with everything Ionic, with a huge library of courses, material, and a supportive Slack channel so we can get your app out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you inside the next video. Have a great day and happy coding. Simon.